very special midweek episode of the show. Yes, you lucky people, you get me twice in 1 week. Oh, isn't that fun? Anyway, yes, well, anyway, yes. So today's episode of the show, I thought it was about time we did another Arran episode of the show. No excuses for doing yet another Arran episode of the show. As you know, I quite like Arran, and while the distillery and the distributors still kindly send me samples, well, it would be rude not to take a look at them, wouldn't it, honestly? And the main reason for doing this week's episode of the show on Arran is obviously to take a look at the new bottling, the new 21-year-old, which as far as I'm aware is the oldest bottling that the distillery have actually released, considering the distillery obviously started production in or was founded in 1993. But imagine production started a little bit after that. So this is obviously coming from some of their older stocks, although in saying that I do have one bottling here in the lineup which is actually a little bit older than that, so again would have come from their original stocks, and the other ones are made up of an interesting selection, shall we say, which, you know, hopefully will be entertaining. And well, I guess there's not really a great deal to say about the distillery because I've pretty much said it all, because I've done, I don't know how many episodes I've done on Arran now, but quite a number, shall we say. So let's just crack on and take a look at today's lineup. Right, okay, so now today's tasting is, I've kind of lined it up stylistically rather than age or ABV, as I often have a tendency to do, and hence we're going to kick off with the oldest bottling here today. This is a 22-year-old single cask bottling in the Carn Celebration of the Cask range. It was distilled in 1996, May of 1996, and I believe it will be bottled at 55.4%. Now I say believe because it was supposed to have been bottled last month, but for some reason there's been an issue. I don't know what the issue is. It could well be labelling, who knows, but it hasn't as yet materialised, so that's why the bottle shot in the opening title page is a rehashed bottle from another distillery, but we shall see when it does actually appear. Second bottling we're looking at is the first of the distillery bottlings. This is the Sauternes finish, bottled at 50%. Now, excuse me, the reason I kind of bagged a sample of this was when Sarah from Indie Brands was doing a tasting in the shop over Christmas, was basically because when I first tasted this many moons ago, it was unpeated spirit and it was really nicely balanced, and then I tasted it again some years later and there was a distinct peaty character going on there, and I thought, oh hello, that's a bit different, and wondered whether this was a sort of obviously a new direction that the distillery were actually going with this particular bottling, because in actual fact I thought that the sweetness of the Sauternes cask really worked well with the peating character. I mean, it wasn't a huge peat monster, it wasn't quite as peated as Macri Moore, but there was certainly a peaty, earthy kind of character there. So be interesting to see where this one comes in, because is it peat? Is there no peat? Who knows, but we shall obviously soon find out. Right, third bottling we'll be looking at is the first edition of the Explorer series, which was released tail end of last year. This is a 20-year-old bottled at 49.8, and I finally got a sample of it. Sold it all, but you know, now I've finally got a sample, which is really quite nice, so you can see what all the fuss was about. I believe aged in a combination of bourbon and ex-sherry hoggies, and I think it was vatted and finished in ex-Oloroso butts. So as you can see, we've got quite a colourful selection here. Next bottle we're looking at is the 21-year-old. It has just, well, I say recently been released. I think that was again tail end of the... Yes, it was. It was the tail end of the year. Yes, thank you for letting me know that, Barbie. Yes, this is, as far as I'm aware, 100% sherry matured. And I must admit, I mean, if it's anything like the 18-year-old, which I think is pretty much all sherry matured as well, the balance should be absolutely spot on. I mean, I'm guessing that the distillery probably use more refilled sherry butts than they do first fill, which is good because I love the character of Arran, and I don't want to see it sort of swamped under the hobnailed boot of first fill sherry, should we say. But anyway, so we shall see what that one is like. Now we're going to take a step back in time. It has to be said, this is a very old bottling. Not in actual an age statement, but rather from, it was bottled in 2008, so this sample has been sat around for ages. And yes, I've already smelt it before we started, and it is amazingly still alive and kicking. So this is a Murray McDavid bottling, distilled in 1996. The tie-in obviously with the other two, or with the Carn bottling. So it's a 12-year-old. It was bottled in 2008, 46% as per the want with the Murray McDavid range, and originally matured in ex-bourbon cask, but finished for a period of time which I don't know, in ex-Chateau Margaux casks. So yeah, one of the classic wine finishes. So we're kind of now leading into the final bottling, which is the distillery bottled port finish, which, to be fair, I've never been a big fan of. I love the other wood finishes. They've always come across as really well balanced. Even the Amarone finish, which is pretty amazing considering how that can be sometimes quite, well, how Amarone casks or Italian wine casks in general can be quite butyric, which is one of those things. But I've always found the Arran one to be quite nicely balanced. But the port one I've always found to be unbalanced, always too much port, not enough distillery character, and I've never been a fan of it. So I wanted to try it again just to see if it had kind of fallen back in line, shall we say, with the other wine cask finish releases, or not, as the case may be. So that's this afternoon's lineup, isn't it, Buddy Gang? So let's kick off with the celebration of the cask bottling. Right, okay, so let's have a look at the celebration of the cask bottling. Once I get the cat hairs out of my nose, that is, anyway. Right. Not a huge amount of sherry character, which is not really a surprise. Yes, there's a little bit of dried fruit. There's some lovely oxidised apple, apricot. Some lovely sweet barley in that luscious Arran fruit, that sort of almost kind of subtropical fruit. Hello, we've got, oh, pitching raisin. Right, now where was I? Yes, so, yeah, that lovely lush kind of mature tropical fruit kind of character. A little bit of mango, touch of kiwi, touch of puddy cat. Yeah, oh, good grief. I will get there eventually, honest. It's a touch of salinity, some barley. It's a lovely cask, it has to be said. And just subtly dried fruit, sherry notes in the background. That's a lovely nose. And I must admit, I have found that sort of independently bottled Arrans have been a little bit, shall we say, hit and miss, but this is certainly a big hit, certainly on the nose. Anyway, let's just see what the palate's like. Wow, that's a lovely finish. So it kicks off fresh, juicy, mature, slightly tropical fruit, apricot, apple. Then in comes a little bit of tannin, a light dusting of tannin, slightly chocolatey, little bit of dried fruit. But the finish is absolutely gorgeous. Really silky, lots of raisins, a little bit of prune, bit of chocolatey spice. some saltiness right on the very finish. I mean, that is absolutely a glorious progression, it really is. Yeah, that's how I like my sherry, well and truly well refilled, should we say. Okay, so let's move on to the Sauternes finish. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Let's see if there's any peat or not, should we say. No peat. So I'm guessing the last time I tasted it, it was an aberration. It was probably a bit of an odd batch. Maybe somebody cocked up and just vatted in a bit of a few peated casks. Who knows? But so we got obviously the late harvested, winey, honeyed kind of character. There's some lovely barley, some apricot. Not quite as tropical as you would expect, but then the Sauternes cask is kind of just taking that edge off the tropical fruit, but adding some sort of lush honey and a little bit of earth. It's quite floral, certainly giving it a bit of time in the glass. I'm getting sort of, white flowers, sort of hyacinthy, sort of honeysuckly kind of notes, which again is obviously down to the cask finish. But it's lovely, it's really nice, and again the balance is absolutely spot on. I'm getting sort of salt, I'm getting Arran fruit, I'm getting a little bit of barley, and then I'm getting some cask notes as well. So it's all really well balanced. Let's see what the palate's like. A little bit heavier on the cask, because some quite grippy tannins on the mid palate, a little bit of coffee, plenty of honey, but it's a sort of coffeed kind of honey rather than a sort of an exuberant honey. A little bit of fruit, plenty of barley, touch of salt. I mean, Arran is a fairly robust spirit as it is, and this is kind of adding a little bit more honeyed robustness to it. It's got a lovely malty aftertaste. The spirit kind of comes back after the finishing cask has kind of sort of dropped off, and I kind of quite like that. I find that of many of the wine finished bottlings that I've tasted, Sauternes tends to work really quite nicely, because it's never I've never found it to be blanketing. It always kind of adds that honeyed kind of character and a slight floral note on occasions, but it always seems to sort of work quite well with the spirit, and there's not a lot of wine casks that sort of do that. They can often easily slip into that sort of overly winey kind of character, but certainly yeah, that fits the bill as far as I'm concerned. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Braddock Bay then. So this is part of the Explorer series, which I'm guessing is going to be another 3-bottle series over the next few years. And it's all about scenes from Arran, and so anyway, but we're more interested in what the nose is like, aren't we? There's a fair bit of sherry, but again, it's pretty balanced considering this has been aged in, American oak sherry and then finished in more sherry. Yeah, it's got some chocolatey dried fruit, some cinnamony spices. There's some barley underneath it, there's some apricot. Again, it's got a little bit of sort of oxidised fruit kind of character, both obviously sherry derived and maturation derived. It's got a slight sort of aromatic note as well. I mean, this again is just a fabulously balanced whiskey at the end of the day. I mean, given over time, I am getting a little bit more of the sherry character, but it's certainly not sort of swamping the malt at all, and it's certainly not making it one-dimensional, and and although you can smell that maturity, it's not like I would have expected at 21, and probably the same goes with the celebration of the cask bottling. I would have expected it to feel a lot older, or I would have expected more maturity, I guess, at 21, 22. But this is just kind of, I guess, going to show that probably Arran could carry on aging, and I wouldn't be surprised to sort of see 30 or 40-year-old bottlings appearing in due course, shall we say. That's a nice nose. Let's see what the palate's like. Quite silky, a lot more of the Oloroso character, that gritty, tannic, herbally kind of character. A bit of prune, bit of raisin, not quite so much barley and distillery character, it has to be said. It doesn't quite have the balance of the nose, but again, it's pleasant, it's nice. It's probably, I'm not going to sort of, you know, get overly effusive about this particular bottling because the sherry is a little bit more dominating on the palate, and I would have liked it to have been more like the nose, but it's very clean. It's nice salty finish. I'm not getting quite so much sort of, like I said, distillery character or maturity oxidation kind of character. It does seem to be kind of more about, like I said, the sherry, and it does seem to be in stasis is not the right word, but if you kind of get what I'm saying, it's not, doesn't feel as old on the palate, mainly because of that sort of Oloroso character. But still, I think if you purchase this particular bottling, it's not a bad bottling. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 21-year-old. Certainly looking forward to this one. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Really coastal, and I mean really coastal, almost fishy. It's a kind of almost Springbanky kind of character, but not with the gritty. Yes, there is an almost kind of Springbanky character. I'm glad you spotted that, little buddy cat. Yeah, but not in that kind of gritty tannic way. It's very soft. It's got some lovely creamy oak notes, some vanilla, touch of toffee. And yes, there is some sherry dried fruit, but again, it is really very, very balanced. I'm getting some, yeah, slightly sort of orange peel, orange zest, citrus, more salt. Yes, the sherry is starting to become a bit more dominant the longer it's left in the glass, but give it a bit of a swirl. And like I said, you're getting that kind of oily, briny, fishy sort of character, which, like I said, is kind of almost like a sort of a pseudo Springbank kind of character. Which, yeah, it's interesting. It's different. It's lovely in actual fact, I think. Yeah, a little bit of cinnamon now, pepper. No, not quite pepper. Yeah, it's more cinnamon. Let's see what the palate gives us now. Really quite chewy, malty, slightly tannic. Oh, you are a jiffle ass this morning, aren't you? Yeah, chewy, tannic, quite raisinated on the finish. But again, I think the balance is pretty good. It kind of kicks off with the barley, a slight fishy note is still there, some citrus, saltiness, and then in comes the sherry. Certainly, it's kind of like, almost like the Oloroso, it's kind of building up, if you see what I mean, and then suddenly go, whoa, I'm here, you know. But it's more kind of chocolatey than herbal, which is quite nice. like I said, really juicy, really malty, lots of raisinated fruit, sultana, fig, little pruny as well. I mean, that's a stunning length, it has to be said. And again, really nice progression. Yes, all right, the sherry is kind of quite heavy on the finish, but you know, I don't kind of mind that so much. You know, it's not like all I can taste is Oloroso. I'm getting other characteristics as well, and the progression is really very, very good. So yeah, I'll have some of that on the shelf, hopefully fairly shortly. Okay, so let's move on to the Murray McDavid. Now, interesting fact about, well, it's not an interesting fact, but an interesting point, shall we say, about Murray McDavid. They actually got in touch with me a few weeks ago, in actual fact, and left me with a load of samples, which I have kind of stacked there, shall we say, ready for an episode of the show. So it will be the return of the prodigal doggy, I think, because it's been a long time since I've stocked any of the Murray McDavid bottlings. Anyway, but I digress. Let's get back to this one. Let's see what the nose gives us. Really creamy cherries. Again, a slight fishiness. This sample has held up amazingly well, considering I've had this smidgen in this bottle now for almost 10 years. Would you believe that? I mean, good God. Again, really well balanced. I'm getting the American oak character. I'm certainly getting the barley, the slightly tropical apricot, touch of banana, some spices. And then, like I said, the cherry fruit, red fruits, a touch of tannin. And I remember stocking this many years ago, and I remember it was bloody cheap as well. That was back in the day, it has to be said, when a 12-year-old was relatively inexpensive. I mean, maybe you can find this on some auction sites or what have you, but this was one of those wine finishes that were, the balance was really very, very good. Excuse me, cat hair in the throat. Let's see what the palate's like. Creamy, juicy, winey, some barley, apricot. It's one of these kind of whiskies that doesn't really have a great deal of progression. It does kind of dump everything on the palate all in one go, and you're going, oh my God, what the hell am I tasting? And so you kind of try and pick it apart. The finish is a little bit short, but that's probably more down to the fact that the sample's been hanging around for a number of years. Some lovely spice, touch of tannin, not overly tannic. Which is quite pleasant, and all round pretty harmonious. So although I think that this particular sample has probably sort of deteriorated a little bit with age, it's still pretty much alive and kicking. Still got a lovely salty aftertaste. Yeah. Okay, so let's finally get on to the Distillery bottled port finish. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? I'm still not warming to this. It's really quite heavy on the winey sort of, almost kind of confected sort of black red fruits. There's a bit of kind of barley underneath, but again it's really kind of heavy. It's kind of a bit unwieldy, and I really think they ought to kick this portwood finish into the long grass. Personally, it's just not working for me. I mean, I don't know how long it's finished for in the port cask, but it's just too much port, not enough distillery character. Although, in saying that, this is probably the lightest portwood finish I've tasted. But the trouble is, of course, because it's obviously so variable, I couldn't put it on the shelf because I wouldn't know what I've got. I wouldn't know whether I could sell it and say, oh, this is really well balanced. It's actually sort of got some distillery character, and the customer comes back and goes, what the hell were you talking about? All I could taste was bloody port fruit. So it's not like the other bottlings in the finished range, which have more consistency of character. This is obviously more inconsistent. But again, the quality is really good, and if this is your kind of cup of tea, then I'm certainly not going to put you off it at all. Personally, I'd rather go with any of the others. But anyway, let's see what the powers are. Winey, tannic, dry. I think if this was bottled at anything less than 50%, it really would be just sort of like overly dry and tannic. The alcohol does seem to gives it that mouth-watering finish, that juice, that kind of adds juiciness to it. Bottled at anything less, and you'd be just sucking bloody wood at the end of this finish. Yeah, it leaves me cold, it has to be said. I mean, like I said, nothing wrong with the quality, pristinely clean, no sulphur, no off notes, no fuss, no must, but yeah, it's just not really that exciting, it has to be said. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Right, firstly, a big thank you to Indie Brands, to Arran, and to Morrison Mackay for the obvious, and Murray McDavid, almost forgot, for the samples for today's episode of the show. Obviously, as per usual, really appreciate the support that I get from the industry. And obviously I appreciate you guys kind of watching, and hopefully you're thoroughly entertained as I am. So anyway, the celebration of the Cask Arran, absolutely gorgeous, really nice. Just my kind of sherry matured whiskey, i.e. well used sherry butt, shall we say. And like I said, when this is finally released, it will find its way onto the shelf. Ain't going to be cheap, I will say, but if you've got the sort of the moolah for it, it's certainly worth it. The Sauternes finish, well, like I said, it kind of like reinforces my opinion that the last time I tasted it, it was just a bit of a vagary, shall we say. There's no peat there. It's all really well balanced in actual fact, and yeah, I really like that. The Braddock Bay. Yeah, kind of not quite so overly enthusiastic about it, but still, good bottling, clean, a little bit heavy on the Oloroso, certainly on the palate for my personal taste, but then that's my personal taste, it has to be said. You guys may well think differently. The 21 was, that was stunning. I mean, 100% sherry matured, but again, it just goes to show that when Arran, and I forget the master distiller's name, oh God, I should know it, but anyway, James McTaggart, I think, is it? Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, all I can say is that's bloody good. I mean, that's how to do sherry. I mean, just it's still got the distillery character. Yes, the sherry kind of comes through on the finish, but that finish was bloody amazing. And yes, not cheap, but yes, worth it, I think. The Murray McDavid bottling, yeah, really nicely balanced. Goes to show that sort of, Arran, obviously, there are other people mucking around with wine casks, and Arran, I will say that by and large really kind of works well with wine casks, with the exception of port. It doesn't do port particularly well, in my opinion. It does everything else, but it doesn't do port. But anyway, that's a life. We can't all be 100% perfect, and God knows we're not, are we really? But anyway, that's this midweek episode of the show in the bag. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that these bottlings that are available will obviously pique your interest, shall we say, because I love Arran. It's just a great whiskey. It's a great distillery, and that really nice people. It has to be said. Not that I've met them personally, but you know, I've had dealings with them, shall we say? But anyway, I'm waffling now. So that's this week's midweek's episode of the episode in the bag. All I have to say is good afternoon and good rain.